Coming up today on podcast 1948, Ford adds more Tesla superchargers. We got pricing and specs for the Chevrolet Equinox, and VW keeps estate lovers happy with the ID.7 Touring. Plus, stay tuned because later I'll tell you which company's about to overtake Tesla as the world's #1 EV maker. But first, let's talk Ford and the UAW and the strike, which is over, and 56,000 Ford workers now under the UAW umbrella contemplating the ratification of this agreement to introduce a new way of battery plant employees to become part of the unions. It also proposes reinstating certain provisions previously lost to abolish wage layers, and after a 41-day strike, this proposed deal has a shelf life now until April 2028. Workers can get a base wage hike of 26% and cost of living adjustments. The deal, if they accept it, ramps up Ford's per vehicle labour expenses by several $100s. Now, focal point for the union, the deal that ensures workers at any forthcoming battery plant, whether it's a joint venture or wholly owned, enters the union to receive master agreement wages. They don't want to go factory by factory and do this piecemeal. They wanted a blanket agreement of these new battery facilities cropping up all over the US. This deal applies to them. The larger vision, integrate as many non-union sectors as possible. Now, let me add some context. General Motors recently consented to include its battery plant workforce, at least at one place, into the union. And although Ford doesn't operate any plants yet, they have got solid plans for 4, and notably, Ford halted construction on its solely owned Michigan venture. And they explained that was profitability concerns from various factors, but it was all part of this negotiation, surely, wasn't it? Well, there's the Rouge Electric Vehicle Centre where the F-150 Lightning is made. They'll add a new EV truck to that. There's the Kansas City Assembly Plant where the Transit EV is made. There's the Louisville Assembly where there's going to be a new EV product out of, and Ohio Assembly where there's a new EV van coming as well. And all of these facilities under one umbrella agreement with the union. What does it mean for the world of EVs? Well, that could mean that those that aren't unionised, and Tesla is the poster child of those, that the people who work in there are looking over their shoulder and thinking, well, hang on, if we unionised, we could get a better deal, and maybe our colleagues working at the big three have got something good going on. Maybe Tesla is more of a mission-driven company, and the people who work in there are motivated by other things, maybe things like stock options, etc. And just being part of the Tesla culture is what drives people to work there, not necessarily the unionization issue. So what else could it mean? Well, it could mean that if the wages are better at alternative employers, that those that aren't unionized lose good people. Bit of a brain drain as people go for the higher salaries at these unionized EV and battery facilities. But really, nobody knows yet until this all shakes out. It's one I'll keep a close eye on. All right, moving on. And Ford is expanding their charging network with more Tesla superchargers. I got so excited when I saw the headlines. I thought, after BP bought those V4 superchargers to own and operate, first time anyone's done that, last week, Ford are doing it? No, this isn't. This is an announcement to integrate not 12,000 but 15,000 Tesla superchargers into their EV charging network. So what is it? It's called the Blue Oval Charge Network, and that also got bigger as well, part of this announcement. 25% bigger, 106,000 chargers under that one umbrella. New partnerships with the likes of Francis Energy, Blink, and Red E in the US and Canada. Ford like to emphasize how easy it is with charger routing and seamless payment through the Ford Pass app. And among the forthcoming additions, the network will incorporate over 10,000 new chargers and 550 new DC fast chargers. But these aren't chargers in the ground we're talking about with Tesla. I'm not quite sure what this is, because this was a little bit of a fluffy announcement, but perhaps for some reason these 3,000 superchargers in North America weren't included for whatever reason. Maybe they weren't part of the magic dock, or they weren't connected in the same way on Tesla's back end or whatever. Maybe they're V2s or something, I don't know. But if you do, let us know in the comments below. I'd love to know if you're more of a Tesla expert than I am, where these extra 3,000 have been added, but these are definitely not new superchargers in the ground. But still, brilliant news that Ford once again is leading the way in terms of that agreement with Tesla. All right, next, and we'll talk the Chevy Equinox EV. Pricing details and specs unveiled. Last night, GM got the assembled media on the phone and talked through some of the pricing and the launches for 2024, and it will start at $34,995. Now, yeah, I know if you've been following this, that's $5,000 more expensive than they've been talking about, but if you've also been following the world of EVs for any longer than 5 minutes, you know that between announcement and the vehicles arriving, I'm looking at you, Cybertruck, there is often no way that the initial pricing is met. This isn't that big of a stretch, is it? It was going to be a $30,000 car. The base model of the Equinox will be $34,995. It will get the $7,500 EV tax credit, which starting from January the 1st will be claimed instantly at dealerships. You can transfer that over to the dealership. It's effectively, call it cash on the hood if you want to use that expression, which is the effective starting price, $27,495, before local and state level incentives. Some of those in California, New Jersey's pretty good. You can get more money off those vehicles. Now, GM's strategy for the Equinox eliminated the smaller option among two battery packs, though I'm not sure I even knew what the battery pack sizes were for the Equinox, but the bigger one is the one that's left, which is 80 kilowatt hours. Now, despite the recent production delay announced by CEO Mary Barra, the vehicle will initially release in two specs. There's the 49,000 front-wheel drive 210 horsepower version and the $52,400 all-wheel drive 290 horsepower versions. You can book those and order them from next week. They said early November, so I'm guessing this week, early next week. While Chevy hasn't elaborated on the features for the initial batch, you could guess that specs like the 3LT or the 3RS trims are the ones. They're the premium ones. They're going to generate more profit and they'll come first. The more affordable 1LT base model front-wheel drive is still listed on the consumer-facing website at the minute. As of recording this, you can see that it's listed online, and it says it's coming spring 2024, which it absolutely isn't. Hopefully by 2025, there'll be a base model out with 250 miles of range to get that in the high 20s or even mid-20s, like I say, which I think is a really good price anyway. It's an exciting vehicle that is coming. But maybe someone get hold of the internet department and update their website. I don't know. Left hand talk to right hand. Now let's talk Volkswagen and the ID.7 Tourer, which is their new electric estate wagon, shoot and brake. They've called it the Tourer. The ID.7 Tourer is the name they've given it. It's the estate variant of the saloon. Official unveiling will be early next year, and it rests on Volkswagen's MEB platform, like the ID.345, ID.7, etc. The estate has big boot space, 545 litres seats up, 1,714 litres seats down. That's bigger than a Passat, by the way. Given the saloon's impressive range, which is 435 miles with this new bigger battery, expectations are high that the estate version would at least be the same. Aerodynamically, very slightly worse, looking at the figures, so maybe a few miles off of that. The ID.7 Saloon, introduced earlier in the year, has two versions, the Pro and the Pro S. German customers can reserve the Pro now for €57,000. That's 48,000 UK pounds equivalent. The ID.7 is going to hit European and Chinese markets before Christmas, before the end of the year. Battery options include the 77 kilowatt hour pack, that's 382 miles, 170 kilowatt peak charge rate, and a fresh, bigger battery. It's 86 kilowatt hours, 435 miles, like I mentioned, and a peak charge rate of 200 kilowatts. But it all comes down to the software in these vehicles. So let's talk about that. Porsche and Google are going to join forces for enhanced infotainment. It's a big announcement today because we've seen Google getting into EVs. It's done pretty well in the Volvos and the Polestars. Now, Porsche is set to incorporate Google Maps, Assistant, Google Play Store, etc. in upcoming new vehicle models. These features are expected to be by the middle of the decade, and Porsche enthusiasts can still expect to see the familiar Porsche interface, but Android Automotive will run within that. So it'll be kind of like a Porsche-branded version, or maybe as Android is sort of a sub-part of that. We'll see how it works out in practice. I can't wait to see it in practice. But of course, that means if it's part of Android, it's going to receive updates a lot more often than VW Group have been pushing updates, and often not even pushing. You've been going back to your dealer to get your software sorted out on those VW Group cars. Now, of course, what the Porsche and the Audi are going to be sitting on from next year, from the middle of the decade, is going to be very different to what we've had so far. So let's talk about it. Volkswagen's software division is called Cariad, and they're facing another delay in releasing their new software architecture. Because this time, this report says impending layoffs. Established only 3 years ago, Cariad's looking at cutting 2,000 jobs, reported by German outlet Manager magazine. The workforce reduction is going to push back the launch of Software 1.2 by up to a year and a half. Now, Software 1.2 was meant to be, as far as I understood it, for things like the Porsche Macan, which was meant to be released, now, before the end of the year. The Audi Q6 e-tron, meant to be released, now. Those have been pushed back to, the last I heard, spring next year, maybe March, April time. However, Cariad, if they're delaying the software, what does that mean for the release of these models? It could mean that Software 1.2 doesn't come out until 2025. Does that mean the Macan and the Q6 also get delayed again by another year? I don't know. I can't find an answer today, but I'll keep asking the question. So, besides this software version, the whole new 2.0 architecture was pretty much, not so much scrapped, but they went right back to the drawing board and started again with that. And so we're looking at vehicles towards the end of the decade having this. The organizational reshuffle will influence this new platform called the SSP, Scalable Systems Platform. And heck, we've seen it. It's a contentious issue at VW. Software continues to be a head scratcher. It's cost them, heads of the company, and they are still struggling to get there with it. I think they will, but it just goes to show what an amazing job that some of those newcomers to the market, the Teslas, the Rivians from China, the likes of the Xpungs, that have a bit more vertical integration with, if you want to call them software-defined vehicles, then so be it. Then what an amazing job they are doing, and perhaps, even though we give them lots of praise, deserve even more, because the likes of VW still struggling with this. So let's talk about it. The Skoda Enyaq is set for its second-generation debut in 2028 with some crazy fast charging speeds because of the SSE platform. This time it's the CEO of Skoda, talking to Autocar magazine, saying that the new SSP platform will be used by Skoda, and it's going to be used by 80% of VW Group vehicles in the future. But when that comes, 2028? 2029, around the same timeline, there's also going to be electric versions from VW of, I gather, the Golf as well, because they're going to go back to keeping that name. Not that they said, hey, we regret doing the ID numbers, but we've got some great nameplates like Golf. Why lose all of that heritage? Now, last year, they sold 54,000 Enyaqs, and Skoda's doing really well with that vehicle, actually. I like it a lot. Not cheap. It's quite a premium vehicle. And the second generation of it would be really good on a platform like SSP with 12, 15-minute charging to get to 80%, new drivetrains, new batteries, new software, but a lot of work to do between now and then. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about used EV prices and why they could get even cheaper, and a new charging network here in Europe has been given the go-ahead. Stick around, back in a sec. And if you'd like your podcast ad-free, whether that is the audio version, the free version on your podcast apps, or the one you get on Patreon, that's the ad-free version. So if you'd like to support this show, you can get the show on the air. It's how you pay my wages. And that's through our patrons and our supporters at Patreon, patreon.com/EVNewsDaily. And you get your own unique RSS feed, paste that into your podcast app, and you strip out the ads. One of the perks of being a Patreon supporter. Now, let's talk about the crazy, bonkers, fast, insane ZEEKR 001 FR. That's their new EV. And we get news today coming out from China that the specs we thought it was going to have, it's even better. And the price, it's even cheaper. But this is not a cheap vehicle, so bear with me. Contrary to earlier speculations, the quad-motor EV is now more powerful, accelerates quicker, and is about $30,000 cheaper. It's got over 1,300 brake horsepower. 0 to 62 miles an hour, 0 to 100 kph is now going to be 2.02 seconds, which okay, is 0.05 seconds faster than we were told, but still an improvement, and they are still throwing shade at the plaid versions from Tesla, saying they're dull and boring, because this is quicker. It's got the 800-volt architecture and the CATL Kirin battery that's 100 kilowatt hours, but that is the one with the crazy fast charge speeds of 15 minutes, 80%, 10 to 80% charge speed. Silicon carbide motors, crafted internally by ZEEKR, and the parent company, Geely, are doing some really, really good things in EV world. Now, there's going to be 100 of these made a month. It's not going to sell huge numbers because of the price as well. It's $105,000 equivalent, which is still a big drop from what we thought it was going to be. And this vehicle is slated one day for a global release, but availability, like I say, is going to be very limited. But what about the pricing of EVs? Now, over here in the UK, we've seen them get a lot cheaper recently. I think that's been reflected in some places around the world as well. But new data from New Automotive predicts the fall in prices of used EV vehicles as company leases conclude. Currently, companies have about 475,000 EVs on their books and about another 200,000 extra plug-in hybrids as well. And the majority of those are going to be on 2, 3 or 4 year leases. Over the last 6 months alone, the median price of a second-hand EV here has gone down by £10,000. A significant surge in corporate EV numbers happened in the early 2020s because we have a thing called BIC tax, B-I-K, benefit in kind. And so if you get a combustion car through your work and you're allowed to use that car, not only for business, for getting a pint of milk at the weekend, for personal use, the tax rate's really high for combustion. And our government made it 0%. It's now 1% for EVs. So it only made sense to have a company EV. So we've done really well here in the UK at getting our EV fleet out there. But a lot of it's been company purchases rather than personal purchases. The first batch of these corporate corporate-owned EVs are now coming into the second-hand market, and people are benefiting from these policies as these cars come off the lease. And so, hey, terrible if you're selling a car, and I've got a couple of EVs I really should sell and change over now. But I've been saying that for weeks. I'll get around to it. If you're buying an EV, well, it's great news. And the pricing looks like it is set to stay reasonable. And, if you've been following EVs, again, for more than 5 minutes through COVID, we saw those crazy, crazy prices, and we saw wait times of 18 months, and people were buying cars and running them for a year and selling them for more than they bought them for. That's all gone now. And so maybe people need to make sure they sort of recalibrate their perceptions of EVs. Not as expensive as they think they are. Now, let's talk about a new way to charge them in Europe. EU has Greenlights, BP and Iberdrola's €1 billion fast charging joint venture. The EU regulators have given the nod to BP and Iberdrola's collaborative effort on a fast charging business. No competition concerns. They had a look at that over the last year. The partnership announced last summer aims to set up and manage 5,000 DC fast chargers by 2025 and have 11,000 under its new wing by 2030. That includes the current installations of the likes of Iberdrola. They oversee 2,500 charge points at the moment. BP also has an extensive DC fast charging network, mainly the UK and Germany. In the Iberian Peninsula, BP wants to leverage their petrol stations, transforming them into charging hubs. They've got the land. They're already selling the gasoline and the snacks that go along, with it in their little shops and stuff. And so they want to add a lot of EV chargers to those places. And that's brilliant news. The more charging, the better. We can't get enough of these kind of announcements because we just need so much more charging infrastructure in the right place. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video, BYD has announced some impressive financials, but also their deliveries as well. And if you follow the pattern through, they're doing exceptional work at BYD. Q3 revenue was 40% up year on year, 40% up quarter on quarter. Net profit was $1.42 billion. That's 10.41 billion RMB. And the third quarter saw BYD's deliveries at 824,000 for new energy vehicles. That includes plug-in hybrids. Strip them out, it's 435,000 pure BEVs. That was only 3,500 fewer deliveries than Tesla in the quarter globally. BYD is catching Tesla, and the Chinese maker has sold in the first 9 months of this year 1.04 million BEVs compared to Tesla's 1.32 million, but the rate that they are catching, there'll be a crossover point at some point, maybe before the end of the year, maybe early next year, when BYD becomes the world's biggest pure EV maker. Now, let's talk batteries and CATL, the world's #1 EV battery maker. Their new battery manufacturing base in China has an impressive average production speed of 1 cell per second rolling off their automated lines. Now, production started October 27th, and the establishment of their 60 gigawatt hour a year capacity. This is a mega capacity here. The first phase is now operational, 95% automated, and it means that you can, like I say, have a cell made every second, the average size battery pack in about 2.5 minutes at this one facility. Now, let's talk about Mack trucks, finding ways for their customers to go EV in a world where the purchase price can be a little bit higher initially for battery electric trucks. So they've launched the Electrify subscription service via their financial services. For their customers, the financial model is about pay as you go, really. Miles driven, the charging, incentives, insurance, maintenance, into one payment to minimize the initial costs for their commercial customers and to reduce any kind of long-term risks. Customers have the freedom to terminate their subscription at the end of its term, and they've got more of an idea of a fixed cost if you're paying as you drive it. Well, Mack also have an infrastructure package as well, where they'll help install charging, design the charging stations, construct them, install them, and have the necessary hardware and software for their clients as well. And finally, LG Chem, the South Korean firm, has pioneered a new battery shield capable of resisting flames, reaching temperatures of 2,732 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. And that's a good thing, because if you wrap EV batteries in this stuff, it's 4 times more efficient than what they're using at the moment. Now, we all know you can't drive an EV down the road more than 5 miles before it bursts into flames spontaneously. So that's great news for the hordes of EV cars that are just abandoned on the side of our roads, having burned down. You can sense the sarcasm, can't you? Now, EV fires are far more infrequent than combustion fires, but they always make the media when there's either a thermal runaway incident because of a big accident, or because of debris on the road, or just because of a freak incident. This is a thermal runaway, one of the big things with EV batteries. It is one of the things that new chemistries fixed, like the lithium iron phosphates, the blade batteries from BYD, much more stable, but with some of the chemistries you can get this in freak incidents, and so this new material would certainly give emergency services a lot longer to deal with it and to contain any incidents. Well, thank you very much for watching, and thank you so much if you've subscribed to the channel and you've noticed there's not been much going on for a long time. I just couldn't get the format of these videos how I like them compared to the audio version, but you know what, I think we're going to suck it and see and just make stuff and look at the feedback, and if we do shorter videos, longer ones, I don't know, but I think the key is let's just get back and making the stuff on YouTube, and it'll complement the audio stuff that we do as well, and we'll get there with it. I think that I'd rather make it than not make it, and I'd rather suck it and see, even if it's not perfect. But I'm kind of happy with the format of this now, but I think it can be a bit better. Leave your comments and your suggestions below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow, and remember, there's no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.